Hello.
Hey there.
Hi. Good morning or afternoon. I just woke up, so it's technically morning for me.
It's about 2 minutes till noon here, so you're still good.
So we will get started about 2:05. So 5 after to give folks a chance to get in here and be quiet.
Yeah, no problem.
All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. This is the Bring a Hacker to Work Days, which is our Black Girls Hack version of a Day in a Life series. So our speaker today is Russ Rogers. He is both a legend and a hacker with over 30 years of experience in hacking, coding, exploits, penetration testing, red teaming, DFR, a little bit of everything. Most interestingly, he was a university program chair for the network security degree program for 13 years and also a retired chief of operations from the DEF CON summer conference. He was on the staff for DEF CON for over 19 years, and he currently is a part of Microsoft's detection and response team. I've heard nothing but amazing things from people online, from one of our past Bring a Hacker to Work Day alums, Franklin, as well as other random people who are just singing Russ's praises. So I'm very happy to have him here and excited to hear, how he got to where he's at today. So welcome, Russ.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I always get embarrassed when people talk about me. It's more of a I've been around a really long time, so I'm like I'm that old couch in the corner at the fraternity or sorority house that's been there for a really long time that no one wants to get rid of. So it's a little embarrassing, but thank you for the intro. I do appreciate it. So I keep these kinds of talks pretty open. I welcome questions. Everything that I'll tell you today, I want to premise with the fact that my career, where I am today, was more accidental than anything else. It was a matter of screwing up, making the right choices after that, looking for opportunities that were interesting to me, that I was passionate about. And, you wake up one day and you're 50 years old and you're me. So that's kind of what happened. Just to kind of give you a start, I was born in '69 and I was raised by hippie parents that turned 18 right after I was born. So to say I was an oops would be fair. But, when I was about 9 or 10, my dad brought home a Atari 2600, right? And then he brought home, maybe a year later, a Timex Sinclair 1000. And unless you're just really into super old computers, you may not know what the Timex Sinclair is. It was a little computer about this big, and it plugged into my black and white television in my room. And I had a Radio Shack tape recorder with audio tapes. And I'd put the cassette in, I'd close it, I would put it on record, and then I would type out the program out of the book, right? And, for a 9-10-year-old, those first games were pretty cool. But, Minecraft looks like really high resolution comparatively. And at the time, I really didn't think much of it, right? It was just something I was super interested in. You skip forward a few years. I went from my sophomore year in high school to being a senior. So I tested out in my junior year. And that sounds really cool and impressive until you remember that I was a 17-year-old young man going to university for the first time with my parents not there, with 400 people in a class where they don't take roll, where it's really easy to get beer. You find out that there are clubs you can get into, there's trouble you can get into, all sorts of stuff. So the real kick in the pants here is I actually failed out of college twice for poor grades. And, everybody screws up. Everybody makes mistakes. And that's kind of my biggest lesson to everybody is that it doesn't matter the mistakes you've made in the past. They don't define who you are. They're all learning. There's situations where you improve yourself. You learn from what doesn't work, right? And so, I failed out twice in about 2.5 years. And so I took some time off, and oddly enough, I became a 911 operator. And if anything will scare you straight, it's getting phone calls in the middle of the night where drunk people are having a fight and there's a gun involved and an ex-boyfriend and all sorts of stuff, right? So about 9 months into that job, I decided I was going to take 3 more courses in person, and I was going to figure out if I had my crap together. And at the same time, I was talking to a recruiter for the Air Force. And so my grandfather was a big role model for me. I'm actually named after him. And he had just retired from the Army about this same time and was going into civil service. So I took these 3 classes. I got a 3.85 for this semester, figured I had my crap together, joined the Air Force. So why did I join the Air Force? Well, I joined the Air Force, honestly, to keep me on the path, but also to pay for college, right? I wanted to finish my education. I wanted to get my crap together. I didn't want to live in a little beat up cardboard box somewhere, right? My dad had already kicked me out of the house, told me I had to figure it out. So got into the Air Force. I took what's called a D-Lab. I don't know if any of you are prior military, but the D-Lab is the Defensive Language Aptitude Battery. And I took that along with a bunch of other tests. And what I found out later is that, you can pick all the tests you want to pick a career field, but they're going to add some for things that they really need to fit people in. So I did really strongly on this language test. And so they said, hey, we'll give you $6,000 if you'll join the Air Force for 6 years and do this language thing. I said, that would be super cool. I'd really like to do Russian. And the recruiter said, we're going to put you in Russian. So as it turns out, the recruiter actually has no valid power to pick what language you get to pick. So I went through basic, and then I went to Monterey Language Institute. And so they, when you get there, they tell you what your actual language is. And so they said my scores were too high to do Russian, and they put me in Arabic. So just to kind of give you some, I guess, basis for this, Arabic is considered one of the world's top 3 most difficult languages, along with English and Chinese. And so I didn't know this at the time, right? Surprise. So I go to DLI, and I end up in school for 63 weeks, 8 hours a day just to learn Arabic, right? And bear in mind that before I joined the Air Force, I was running bulletin board systems. I was using my modem to log into, this is after I got kicked out, to log into the University of Oklahoma so that I could telnet over to the University of California, Santa Cruz, because they actually had a node on EFNet, which is IRC back in the day. And there were, I don't know if any of you have done IRC, but if you try and list all the channels and you try and list all the users today, it will actually lock your machine up because there are so many. Back in the day, there were 3,000 people from all over the world. And so it was very gratifying for me to get online. And I met a lot of my hacker friends at that point. So I get through language school. I get to my first assignment, which is in Maryland, right? So I finish up my associates, right? Air Force is great about that. I get my bachelor's from University of Maryland. And then, after 6 years, I get out. And what happens at that point is, you have a couple of options, right? You can try it on your own, bearing in mind that you just spent 6 years of being coddled. Your housing's paid for, your food is paid for, your healthcare is paid for. You literally don't even have to worry about what clothes to wear to work, right? So I became a scum-sucking contractor, is what we call it. So I became a contractor, and I went back to the NSA for about 9 months. And while I was at the NSA, I met some friends on the outside who found out that I was pretty good at Unix and Linux. And so they hired me to work at DISA. And so what ended up happening was I went to DISA. I started working on the initial STIGs. STIGs are security technical implementation guides. If you have to do any government contract work in the military, that kind of stuff, you've probably been forced to use the STIG. So I did a lot of that. But in about 1998, 1999, I don't even remember anymore. I was doing red team and pen testing at DISA for a bunch of, that's my life these days. Sorry. I ended up on the pen testing team at DISA. And so they took me to DEF CON and Black Hat. And so this was DEF CON 6, just so you guys can get some scope, right? So this was really long ass time ago at this point. And so it was, Black Hat was cool. It was still very, very small. It was in a part of Caesar's Palace that no longer exists, oddly enough. You know, it was neat. It was cool. There still weren't, you know, I mean, you could probably count the number of security professionals in the US manually if you had to. So it was still fairly small, but we went to DEF CON, right? It was still right after Black Hat. And I think it was DEF CON 6. It was at the Plaza Hotel. I don't know if you've ever been to the Plaza Hotel, but if you figure this was 98, 99 timeframe, it is everything that you have seen in the old movies about blue hairs, bad lounge singers, old people drinking really cheap alcohol. The place was filled with smoke. And I think we had maybe 800 attendees, maybe less, at DEF CON. And at least a third of them had mohawks or colored hair. Most were wearing leather and spikes. And, you know, they were really trying to live up to that image that the movie Hackers was giving everybody at the time, you know. So there were a lot of very shocked elderly folks in the hotel. And the first 6 years of DEF CON were basically all at different venues. We would hold our event and something would happen and we would be asked not to come back. And so, you know, starting with DEF CON 7, they put us over at the Alexis Park. And so if you've had any conversations with folks that were around at that time, they'll tell you how amazing the Alexis Park was. And I kind of, from the hacker perspective, the Alexis Park is kind of where we all went through that, you know, if you have kids starting around 14, 15, 16, they start kind of rebelling, right? They start doing dumb stuff. They start exercising their independence, right? I can drive now, I can do this stuff, you can't stop me, that kind of thing. And that's kind of what DEF CON ended up doing at the Alexis Park, to be honest with you. A lot of dumb stuff happened, a bunch of crazy stuff happened, but a lot of really amazing stuff happened too. And we kind of, we solidified who we were as a culture, right? You know, you can look at it in the movies, and I can tell you that before DEF CON, it wasn't like that, right? We would meet up at Round Table Pizzas, or we would meet up at libraries, or the majority of the time, 90% of the time, we were all talking online, right? And we would share text files, techniques. We would share game hacks, right? That cracking software was really a big deal, right? But when DEF CON popped up and you all got in the same room and you realized that you didn't feel so different, right? And, you know, being 50 now, I kind of realized that there are a lot of sectors of, not even sectors, just groups of people on this planet that feel exactly the same way we did as hackers at the time, right? We don't belong here. We don't fit in. Everyone thinks we're weird, we're troublemakers, whatever else, right? And so for whatever the rationale is, right, it's that same feeling. I think almost everybody can understand that. And the first time you get into a place where everyone just kind of accepts you for what you are, and you speak the same language, and everybody respects each other, regardless of your hair, where you came from, how well you speak English, or whatever else, right? It all comes down to kind of, you know, what you can do and how much part of the community you really are. And so that's when we got to the AP. We saw a lot of that, right? We saw the troubling sides where people were still kind of acting out, right? So we had people like, well, I'm not going to mention names. So we had people that would push other, you know, people into the pool with their laptops and stuff like that because they were being, you know, whatever. We had people that were taking drugs, doing alcohol. We had more than one person redline on us at the AP. And bearing in mind at the time, everybody on staff was what we called a red shirt. Everybody was a goon. Everybody wore the red shirt. It's just the way it was. And so when these things happen, everybody on staff was responsible for trying to keep everyone safe, or get rid of bad elements, or whatever it was, right? So, you know, there was a responsibility back to the community at the time. And, you know, I think we were at the AP from DEFCON 7 to like 13, you know, I mean, 6 years. And we really, really outgrew it. And it was startling, to be honest with you, right? Because that little hacker conference that we had in the beginning, by the time we moved to the AP the first year, I think we hit about 1,200 people. And by the time we left the AP, we were at like 12,000 people, maybe more. You know, in 6 years, that's phenomenal growth for something that is what it is, right? So it didn't take long, right? I got to Black Hat, I got to DEF CON, and I met Jeff Moss and became friends with Jeff. And, you know, and that's kind of where my career took off, right? So I ended up doing a lot of speaking on my research. I started writing books. I met a lot of hackers that are very well-known quantities today in the security business world, right? So Kevin Mandia, Chris Weissapol, who was Weld Pond, Mudge, Christian Rue, he goes by Dill Dog, right? So they're all on Twitter. And you know, it's interesting to me because I see colleagues that I work with that look at these folks, and you get kind of this filter in your head, right? Like, this person is the CEO or president of this company. And it was always very weird to me because, to me, they were always that person that I would drink beer with, and we would talk shit and talk tech and do all this stuff, right? It was, and so I think I have a little bit different of a worldview than a lot of people, right? So you've got George Kurtz, right? He helped, that whole group there helped start Foundstone. Now, obviously, he's at CrowdStrike, right? You've got Kevin Mandia, you've got Christian Rue, you've got Weld Pond, right? All these people that are out there that are big names. But I guess if I could give you one lesson, always try and look at those people that are at the top of the ladder like they're no different than you are. I mean, that's a truth from my perspective. They all started out at the bottom. We didn't know what the hell we were doing in '98, you know, and we figured it out as we went along. So if anybody's telling you can't do it, if anybody's trying to gatekeep you or tell you don't have the potential or you're never going to be that person, you know, just stop and think about it. Well, I don't want to be that person. I want to be me at the top of my own organization. You all have the ability to do it, right? So, you know, I'm 25 years, 30 years down the road in this hacker thing. I'm getting back involved with DEF CON. I did retire from Black Hat. I was on the review board for Black Hat since that first one. And I helped build up, we used to call them volunteers. We call them conference associates now. But I actually stepped away from that in December, and I really didn't have any intention of going back to DEF CON. But Jeff called me up, and so we're gonna redo the DEF CON awards the way it should be done. So, seriously, if you look back at my life, it's always the shiny stuff that kind of sticks. And so when I talk to people, I want to reiterate the fact that, I failed out of college twice. I ended up having to join the Air Force, right? The fact that I didn't get in trouble for my escapades as a teenager are simply because nobody knew anything about security. Nobody, I mean, you could dial directly into the mainframes at all the universities and the banks. I mean, it was really super easy. So it was luck, it was timing. They didn't have security degrees when I got started. It is what it is. And so there is literally nothing stopping any of you from taking your own path, reaching as high as you want. And I support you. If you need something from me, I try and be very accessible. I'm a little bit different, I think, than a lot of the people that have been in the hacker community. I feel like I owe a lot to give back. That's why I taught for so many years at the university. That's why I worked on so many books that got published. That's why I stayed involved with DEF CON and Black Hat for so long. It was to give back. And so all I would ask is, if anything I do for you is useful for you, that you remember to kind of pay that forward, right? Help somebody else out, right? Because we have to lift each other up. The idea of being a hacker is, in some sense, you never really feel like you fit in completely anywhere else. And so if I can help you and you can help somebody else, and that kind of spreads, right, like the coronavirus, then, it's good for everybody, right? It makes for a better world. So I know I've sat here and I've talked for like 15, 20 minutes, and I apologize. I'm an old man now, so I tell a lot of stories. And I have more. Sometimes I'm never sure what the crowd is like. So some of the stories I don't talk about, but feel free, ask me any questions. And I'm happy to help, I will say that now I've got 1 associate's, 2 bachelor's, a master's, and an honorary doctorate. And you look at all of that and all of the books and everything else after I failed out of college twice, there's literally nothing stopping you. So.
Thank you. All right, so I've got a couple of questions, and then we'll open up to the squad to see if they've got any questions. So at this point in your life, what is your world domination plan? Like, what is it that you hope to achieve with the time that you've got left, versus what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were younger?
Well, I never knew what I wanted to be. I'll be very honest with you. I had no idea, right? There weren't game programming degrees. There weren't computer security or hacking degrees at the universities, right? The people that were doing hacking before me were at places, like Stanford or MIT, right? That's where the original hackers started. Excuse me. And, they weren't doing what we consider what most people call it hacking today, right? So I didn't have a game plan. I really did not. And so by the time I got into Air Force, I finished my associates while I was in, and then I used tuition assistance to finish up my bachelor's while I was still in. And then I actually took on a second duty. I went and talked to the IT folks, and I said, look, I've got this degree. It's in this computer focused thing. And I'm just wondering if you guys need any help with like system administration and stuff. And so at the time, all the systems we were using were either Windows or they were Solaris. And so I ended up getting to work that secondary duty. So I didn't have a game plan going forward. Like I said, a lot of it was accidental, but the one thing that was always constant is that I was chasing my passion. It's my personal belief that you will always do your best. You will always succeed at your highest level if you're chasing your passion. And you can't listen to anybody else telling you it's not possible. that they don't know you. They don't know your passion. They don't know your drive. They don't know where you come from. They don't know any of that. So you really, you always have to believe in yourself. So today, so I'm at a weird point. I've been at Microsoft, and it just kind of the juxtaposition of spending 20 years kind of fighting against Microsoft, helping write exploits, doing all of that, and then eventually ending up at Microsoft. It's a really kind of uncomfortable juxtaposition. But I've loved it here, and I've been doing incident response. And I didn't know that I would be good at incident response, to be honest with you. I spent 20 years breaking into networks. But as it turns out, to do forensics and incident response, those kinds of investigations, it really helps if you've done the hacking, because you kind of understand how that works, right? So I've been here for 4.5 years. I hit 50. I actually hit 51. We won't talk about that. And I have little grandbabies now, right? So this it's all very weird, right? Your life continues on, even though you still feel like you're 20 years old. And so I ended up in a position where I started, people realized who I was within Microsoft, and started these senior leadership roles started to open up. And so, I started a couple of startup companies, and I ran those for a while, and I got into a pretty good position. And so, I could do the work, but is that what I want to do? Right. So, about 5-6 years ago, I went and got that second bachelor's, and it was actually in game programming. And the reason I did it is because I have this theory, that we've generated so much data on computers and networks that we just, the way the data is presented to us, it's not intuitive. So it makes it very difficult for us to solve security problems. If you think about when I got started, VisiCalc was the big killer app if it wasn't Oregon Trail or something like that, right? And everything was in lines and columns. It was all text. And so what we did was we started teaching people to understand data in a way that a computer could put that data out. And now we're 30, 40 years down the road, and we're still doing it. But if any of you have children, nieces, nephews, that kind of stuff, when you see them about 3, 4, 5 years of age, and you set them in front of a new Nintendo or a new Xbox or a Switch, whatever it is, right? A PC game, a game they've never played before. You don't have to give them any instruction. You can walk away for an hour and you can come back, and that small child has figured out how to play a lot of that game already, right? It's just intuitive, because the human brain is designed in such a way to recognize patterns visually, right? We absorb information visually. And so that's why, you can walk into a business building or a coffee shop and you can recognize somebody's face and you may not remember their name, right? Your brain has locked in on the face, right? That recognition. And so I went and got the game programming degree, because I wanted to create a proof of concept. And what I ended up doing was I created a 3D game world called Morpheus. And I don't know if Frank talked about it, but it was one of the things I talked about with him, 5 or 6 years ago. But what Morpheus was, you could run around, you could shoot each other, you could chat, it would track your health, your points, that kind of stuff. But I built in a terminal. So I built this terminal in the game. So if you hit tilde, it looks like, a Linux shell prompt pops up. And you could run ping, you could run a custom port scan that I wrote, you could do whois, NS lookup, you could do all this stuff. But it also had this ability to not just run shell scripts that you had created, you could actually import the results from an nmap scan. And so what it would do is you run an nmap scan, it dumps out the results in XML, and you import that into the game. And for every entity that it finds on the network, if you hit the map it button, it will instantiate a game object for each thing that it finds on the network. And it can change the skin to represent Windows or Linux. It can represent the number of ports that are open, all sorts of stuff. And so that's that's a long way of saying at this point, I'm moving away from the leadership stuff. And I'm actually trying to move over into the Xbox world, right? So there are a lot of unsolved problems over on the game side, but it gives me access to a lot of the tools and stuff for my research. So I can see if we can figure out how to solve this visualizing big security data.
That's amazing. So we have a question from someone on the squad. In Linux, it's way more secure than newer Windows operating systems. Why did Solaris not survive as it was so good?
Well, okay, no, that's fair. So Solaris was amazing. It was, honestly, I think it was a marketing problem. I think it was a business problem. And the day that was Oracle bought Solaris, right? So the day Oracle bought Solaris, you kind of have to figure it's dead at that point. Solaris was written for nerds and geeks and for server operations. It wasn't super easy to use. There wasn't a whole lot of software being built for it. So it just, it died. I don't know how many of you remember the whole VHS versus Betamax fight back in the 70s, but Betamax was actually technologically the much better option for video quality and storage. And VHS won because of marketing. And I think that's kind of what happened with Solaris. Now, as far as Linux being more secure than Windows, it's kind of weird for me because I don't think it's any more secure by default, honestly. And I can see areas where the Windows authentication functionality has actually improved and evolved over time, whereas with Linux, we're still kind of using the same stuff, right? So we still have the etc password file, we still have a shadow file. We're still using LDAP, right? So if I connect Linux systems to Windows systems, now the Linux systems become a liability to the Windows side because you can run commands as any user using LDAP search and query Active Directory from the Linux side without any of that really getting logged on the Windows side. So it's kind of a weird juxtaposition. If you've used OS X, it's the same kind of thing. If you join Mac systems, and I do have Apples here. I'm a huge Apple fan. I also like to keep my money. So it makes it very hard for me to spend too much money on Apple products too frequently. But OS X does the same kind of thing. So if you connect OS X up to Windows Active Directory, OS X installs a whole bunch of tools that people don't normally understand are there. So if you get onto one host, you can query the whole domain from these other OSs.
All right. So the next question I have, you've seen technology change a lot over the years. What do you say are the skill sets that you need to be a hacker today?
So for me, there are a lot of opinions on what it means to be a hacker, what it means to hack. If we look historically, and I know I'm dating myself here. So, to be a hacker, it meant that you were incredibly curious about how technology works. And so that means you end up taking things apart, you finding new ways to use it. And that's how we ended up cracking games, breaking software, finding vulnerabilities, that kind of stuff. So when it comes down to being a hacker, in my opinion, it comes down to doing what you're really passionate about. Don't do what you think everybody else wants you to do to be successful. You've got to do something that means something to you, right? And it's a very, very personal journey. This is not a journey that anybody on Twitter or Facebook or anybody else can tell you what it means, right? It's all about the technology. It's all about understanding how those things work. There is a book. Let me see if I can find it. Hang on one second. So I know this is going to be really nerdy. So if you go down the path of writing exploits and understanding CPU registers or memory addresses or things like that, everybody tells you have to learn assembly. And so if you try and learn assembly on your own, it's usually very, very painful. But so there's a guy that used to live here. Oh, you literally cannot even see the book because of the background. Hang on one second. I don't know how to do it. So there's this book. It's called Assembly Language Step by Step, Programming with Linux. And I'm gonna, how do I do this? Choose virtual background. I have a green screen. Nope. Yeah, here we go. Cool, super cool. All right, better? All right, so there's this book. So the first 5 chapters of this book are phenomenal. Like seriously, even if you don't want to get into exploits, you can see I've started to, I have all these page marks in here. But what's super cool about it is that it doesn't start off teaching you assembly. It starts off teaching you the hardware architecture. And it does that because the general concepts behind CPUs and behind memory and behind registers and behind how software loads itself into these things hasn't changed, right? It's been the same for 40 years. So basically you step through the first 4 or 5 chapters there. And even if you don't finish the book, you're going to be so much smarter about it. So, keep learning, right? Always have a passion, find what's of interest to you. Don't listen to other people if they're telling you, if they're being negative. It doesn't matter, right? It's not their journey. Let them take theirs and you take yours. There's really not even a reason to respond because there's no way you're going to change their mind. And if you're really passionate about what you're doing, there's no reason they should be changing your mind. Look for those people that are going to help encourage you and lift you up and be excited about things you're learning. But being a hacker to me is about following the technology that is really exciting for you, and eventually you're going to find a problem that nobody's thought of before because you've spent a lot of time thinking about it, just because it's interesting.
All right, thank you. So the next question is, what is the best way to get work experience to become a security analyst?
Oh, that's really hard. So one of the things I like about Microsoft, and not all companies do this, but I know some do, we have a very strong internship program, but we also have this thing called Aspire. And I actually got one of my students hired at one point through this program. What they do is they bring you into Microsoft at a fairly low level. I mean, you're right out of college. It's good salary. You have all the benefits and everything. And they hire you for like 18 months. So you're guaranteed for 18 months. And they put you into a specific program based on, your experience, what which managers want you. And then at the end of the 18 months, 24 months, the managers decide if you're still good for this job. You can look for other jobs within Microsoft because you're already inside. And I hate saying it that way because it's really hard to get an internship. When I was younger, there was nobody doing this work, right? Being an intern in these fields was unheard of, right? And now you've got so much competition for it. One of the things that I did with my students in university was I would make them get together in groups of 3 or 4, and they would start their own little company, right? And the idea wasn't to make money. The idea was to make experience and to make references. And so the idea being that you go to your church, you go to your school, you go to a mom and pop business that might need your help. And what you do is you go in there and you do the security work. And it doesn't cost your customer anything, right? All they have to do is let you do the work. And then you bring in and you get them the results, right? So you outbrief them, you give them a report, you tell them what it takes to fix it. And if they want, maybe you help fix it, right? And what you're doing by doing that is you're getting experience, you're getting customers, you're getting letters of recommendation, and you're learning hard lessons, right? There are all those things that you need to be really successful. And so if you can make that work, it's just one more path towards kind of moving towards being a professional, if that makes sense, right? It's a little bit of sacrifice on your side to spend some time doing that, but because it doesn't cost the customers anything except allowing you the chance to do it, it usually works out pretty well.
So I know that you mentioned a lot of the hackers that you came up with along the years. Are there levels amongst you guys? You know, it's kind of easy for us, you know, just coming up now to look up to you guys like you're like icons. So do you guys have levels amongst yourself? Like, is there like a hierarchy?
There's not. And that's I know that's going to be really weird. So I grew up with a lot of these people, right? I mean, they're close friends. They've been friends for 25 years, right? And I look up to them because of what they've done, right? And so when I have these conversations with my hacker friends, they blow me away with how much they know, right? And I'll tell them this, you know, every once in a while. I'll say, God, you know, I've always envied you because you do this, and I look up to you because you know so much about this. And what you find out is that all of those people have been doing the exact same thing, right? And I have found out that, you know, people I've looked up to for decades in the hacker community have looked up to me for different reasons. And so the idea of having levels or having a hierarchy and being hackers, they don't fit in the same box. You just can't do that. Now, having said that, there's obviously hackers that are very good at one thing and other hackers that won't be as good at that, but they're excellent at something else, right? And so the idea is not that anybody is super elite or that much better than anyone else. It's find what you're passionate about and be awesome at that, right? Because there will be people that look up to you if you share your information, if you share your knowledge, if you help, that are going to look up to you. You're going to be a role model, and you may never even know it for years and years. I had no idea. I was that dorky white kid, right? No idea anybody would ever look up to me. And I don't know how I got to where I am today, right? If you're open, if you're kind, if you really treat everyone like equals, yeah, I think you're good. So there should not be levels in the hacker world. I'm sure some people would like it. There are still people that have egos that they need to feed and stuff like that, right? I mean, that's a personality trait. But generally speaking, if you come to DEF CON and you ask any of those people that have been around for 25, 30 years, they don't think there's levels. Now, having said that, I do think there are generations, right? And so the hackers that I grew up looking to as inspiration, you know, you may not know half of their names, maybe not 10% of their names. Those are the people that really inspired me, right? And so now I have become that for a whole nother generation, right? And so you find your role models, and those are generational. It's not the skill sets, right? Because the technology that the people I was inspired by were working on today, you know, it fits in a digital watch, right? And so don't think of it as hierarchies, but it is important to remember where we came from, and those generational gaps are important.
So this is just, I guess, one of I'm asking your opinion. What would you say is one of the greatest hacks that you've ever seen? Like, what was something that maybe you were impressed by, or you just thought like, wow, that's pretty cool?
God, there's so much cool stuff that's happened. There was a point, where was it? It was at the Riviera. So we had when we left the Alexis Park in 2013, we went to the Riviera, and there was a group of hackers called Ninja Networks. And you know, all very cool people, but they were doing things that, you know, like I said, they were into different things, right? So they were still very much into phone hacks and phreaking and stuff like that. And so they actually got a hold of a Pacific Bell utility van, and they worked with the hotel casino to bring it into the RIV. And that's really hard to do because you have to empty all of the liquids out. You have to tow the vehicle into its place, and it has to be sitting on a hazmat mat and all this stuff. But they did it because they filled the inside up with servers and antennas, and they gave out these little phones. They gave, I forget who sponsored it, but they wrote their own cell phone software, right? And so they may have had, I don't know, 300-400 of these cell phones, and I don't know where mine is at the moment. I have one. So they wrote their own software for the phone. They got their own SIM cards. They had their own antennas. And so you could literally walk around the con, use the apps, text your friends over this cell network they had made. And it was also the badge to get into the party. And for me, that was really it was amazing, right? That was fantastic work. That was somebody's passion project, and they put all that effort in. And people at that year's con learned so much about it, right? I mean, it was so cool. And there's still stuff that happens like that. But I'll be honest with you, DEF CON has gotten so large that it's kind of become the South by Southwest of the hacker world, right? We have all these different villages that we created, all these different rooms and, interest groups, right? That people get involved in, and they're all very cool. So if you go, each one of those is like its own little mini DEF CON, right? You may have several hundred people that are all part of the packet capture village or car hacking village or lock picking village or whatever else, right? But that was one of the really cool projects that I thought was awesome.
So as a former educator, what are your thoughts on certifications versus degrees? I know you mentioned you've got like a bunch of degrees at this point, and I don't know where you stand as far as certifications, but what are your thoughts as far as, I guess, proving to someone else your worth versus either certifications or degrees?
So if you'd asked me this 15 years ago, my answer would be different. I've always been a big proponent of formal education, and my reasons for that haven't really changed because, getting a degree is less about everything that you learn to make you completely prepared to do your job, as much as it is learning the foundational knowledge and getting past the HR gateway that exists. The problem that I've had historically with certifications is that they either start out very weak. I'm not a huge fan of the CEH. It was one of the programs we actually discontinued training at one point at Black Hat because we got some really abysmal ratings from the students. And the material was more historical than it was actually useful, right? It wasn't stuff that you could leave after paying $2,500 for a class and use that knowledge to help you get a job, right? In the end, it's going to come down to what you do on your own and these little side projects. If somebody's looking for a degree, they're looking for a degree company. If a company is looking for certain certifications, they're looking for the certifications. And the truth of the matter is, the people in HR, the people in recruiting, they don't know what any of that means. They really have no idea, right? And a lot of the people at the executive level that want to try and hire for these jobs, they don't know what those things mean either. They know that CISSP is a thing. They know CEH is a thing, right? It's always historically been easier for people to understand what it means to have a bachelor's degree, but that doesn't make somebody better. And I've had my CISSP for 20 years now. I did it really early. And the value that it had back then is completely different than the value it has now, right? There's so many people that have it that can't do security, right? We're certifying people as being able to do security that they haven't been given the opportunity to actually solve the problems, to do the work, right? And so I don't know how we fix it, because on the other end of this, it's all about money. It really honestly is. Somebody's making a buck off of you trying to learn when it comes down to paying for a college degree, or whether it comes down to paying, ISC squared for the CISSP. They're all getting their share. And I don't think I don't know that that's fair, right? I think there's a lot of really smart, passionate, talented people out there that just need to be given a chance.
Thank you. All right. So next question is, what have you seen about older people 50 plus trying to get into cyber hacking as a career? Because it seems like college students and younger people are preferred.
Yeah, no, that's a real problem. And I would be lying if I say I hadn't personally been concerned about it, and I understand that because of how long I've been doing this, and the brand that I've inadvertently created over 30 years, that I'm privileged in the fact that, it would be easier for me to get a job than most people. Being 50 and getting into security is not a death sentence, but you need to find the right people that are willing to work with you, right? So there's a guy, Jim McMurray, who started a company. He's an old Coast Guardie that started a company called Milton Security. And Milton Security is, Jim runs VetCon at DEF CON and Black Hat, that kind of stuff. And so from his perspective, he runs a very solid ship. He's got people that do exploit development and pen testing, and then he's got an entire group that do nothing but like managed services, compliance, things like that. And he spends a lot of time trying to hire people directly out of the military. These could be retirees or whatever, right? So he brings these people in. If you can make the right connections, it should be easier for you to get into those things. The other thing that you guys have working in your favor, honestly, is if you have a conversation with someone, say like me, and you make that relationship, if you need to find a door, if you need to find somebody, that next person to talk to try and find your way into a security job and you're 50 or older, I can help you do that, right? And so you make those friends, you find the people that really want to help you succeed. And it's all about knowing people, all right? And so you've got some people that will never, ever introduce you to anybody because it's weird. It's like a badge of honor, right? I know all these people. No, well, they don't want me giving you their name or their email or whatever. Yeah, it's all about knowing people. And so there are people that would hire you. There are people that want you involved. There are lots of people that are willing to help you learn and to get better. You just have to associate with the right people. That, I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's challenging, and I want to help people get past those hurdles.
So I've got two more questions. One, do you still speak Arabic? And two, is your game Morpheus, is it still available? Like, can someone go out and play it today?
So I have the source code for Morpheus on GitHub, and I have kept it private. I've shared it. I have. You're gonna laugh, right? So this goes back to that how you view yourself versus how you view the people you look up to. I'm very embarrassed to let people look at the source code, because while I think it's very cool, I'm so intimate with the project that I know all the different things that are wrong with it, or things that I want to get done but I haven't had time. So it's still a very private project, and I have shared it out with less than 10 people in total, right? I had an entire web page. I talked about it. I had screenshots, kind of walk you through the process of what I was trying to obtain, because I thought it would be useful for other people that wanted to take that research and run with it. I don't know that anybody ever has. The number of people that have had an actual compiled executable Morpheus, it might be 3 or 4 people. I literally just haven't shared it because, I still have imposter syndrome. I'm 51. I've been in the hacker community for 30 years. I still have imposter syndrome when it comes to a lot of the people I deal with, right? That my stuff's not as cool as what you guys have done. And again, I think that's because of how close I am to it, right? As far as Arabic goes, I do know some Arabic. It's not something that goes away. I occasionally dream in Arabic, and that's weird. The first time that happens, that will really freak you out. But it happens a lot less frequently than it used to. I haven't had as much opportunity over the last 10 years to make it back to the Middle East. I've been to the UAE a few times, spoke and taught classes in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I have been to Israel. Obviously, there's not as much opportunity to speak Arabic there. And I was in Turkey, actually. So this was cool. So there is a beautiful Islamic temple there, mosque, Hagia Sophia, I think that's the name. And so this was about the time that all the Syrian refugees were flooding into Turkey and other countries. And so I was walking around, and I'm still in awe of how beautiful these places are. This tiny young Islamic girl walked up, and she was probably maybe 18, 19 years old, right? And she had babies, and there are these Syrian refugees, right? They're sleeping on benches, sleeping on the ground around the mosque and stuff like that. And she came up and she started trying to speak to me in broken English. And I switched to Arabic, and you could see her eyes get really big. And we spoke for a few moments. And I literally gave her all of the cash I had in my pocket for her. I mean, she had two little ones. And so as I was walking away, she asked me in Arabic, she asked me if I was Muslim. And I said, no. But I told her that I was American, right? Because for me, there's and again, this is a personal perspective, right? So there is there's a lack of tolerance in America for things that aren't what we would consider homegrown, right? I just don't think we're viewed in the world as being as empathetic as we could be. And so it was a very small thing. But for me, it felt very good to try and reinforce the fact that there are good people in America that I don't have to be a Muslim to treat you with respect as a human, right? And I was walking away. She had tears in her eyes, and it was very moving for me. So I do get some opportunities to speak Arabic, not as much as I used to, but I don't study it anymore.
All right. Well, thank you. We are a little bit over 3, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but thank you so much for coming out and sharing your story with us, and speaking with us. How can people connect with you on social media, or, do you have any projects that you want to shout out?
Well, I tend to keep my projects to myself because I am very self-conscious about them, but you're all very welcome to send me messages on Twitter, and then we can move it to email. If you want to carry on a conversation, I'm happy to introduce you to stuff or to people. My biggest encouragement is don't let your past stop you. Don't let other people stop you. You're unique in your experiences, the things the things you're really good at. Just go, right? Be the best you. You can do it. And I'm happy to help you.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, you too. Thanks for having me, everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone.